My lovely, lovely, wonderful people, a pleasant evening to you. You know, beautiful people, I'll tell you, communication is a heck of a thing. You know, sometimes the encoder makes the assumption that the decoder has deduced the intended content of the message the way the sender intended. I just have to say it as it is. Just keep the main thing the main thing. And I'm saying that in light of the $80,000 one-time payment that the public sector workers are scheduled to get. And it was actually the understanding of some of the public sector workers, quite a number of them, in fact, that, I had spoken to some and, just listening to some, that this would have been paid during the month of August. I was having a conversation with one and, they were doing some checks, I think, and they were told that there was no signing off as to when the payment would have been given, or been made. And I found that quite unfortunate. It is almost like a slight deception to the people, to kind of give a false hope, because it sounded quite definitive. I remember reading an article last week, I think, or the week before, where it said something like public sector wage deal sealed. And it spoke quite in the affirmative, as though this one-time payment, it wasn't, let me pull back and recalibrate and come again. And based on how the article was written, one perhaps could have made the assumption or presume that the payment was on the cusp of being paid out to the public sector workers. Let me say it in that manner. So I said, when I had the conversation with somebody and they said, nothing has been signed off, I said, let me really check if what the individual said is really and truly so. And I'm looking and it says here, an exact disbursement date for the $80,000 one-off payment has not been officially finalized or announced. So what then was the conversation that was had? That particular aspect of the wage negotiation was in the affirmative. The lump sum is a part of the tentative 3-year wage agreement covering April 1, 2025 to March 31, 2028, agreed upon by the government and the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, JCTU, in August 2026. Processing timelines depend on the formal signing and administrative rollout by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. Then what was the conversation about? That is what has been agreed upon. And the only thing that they wanted, I remember listening to the president, I think it was of the Jamaica Civil Service Association, where they would want to ensure that that $80,000 is not taxed. So I guess they probably negotiated, give them 100 and something thousand. If you tax it, they get at least $80,000. That was the argument presented. And when I, heard otherwise, I said, this is so unfortunate, because they spoke in the, see, I'm looking at it, public sector wage deal sealed, quite unfortunate, because a lot of people were talking about to say, oh, this payment will be paid out in the month of August. That is the belief of many, believe it or not, and even another article says union government reach preliminary public sector wage. And I figured when it said preliminary, on the basis of the argument presented by others, was that we want to ensure that we negotiate that do not tax this $80,000, or they negotiate for 100 and something, that if that 100 and something is taxed, the people get 80,000. And I think I was listening, I was listening to the Jamaica Civil Service Association president. She spoke on the Thursday of the Friday of the particular week. She said on Tuesday we will, have another conversation around the topic. powers that be, you have to be very careful in how messages are spread and given, because it really sold a sort of confusion to the people of Jamaica. Many thought that this would have been paid in August. They figured it was just a little, it didn't take much conversation to say, all right, do not tax the 80. Let's put it to whatever it is, do not tax the 80. Whichever algorithm you use, whichever mathematical application is, put forward, do not tax the 80. That is what the people, that is a message, the sort of inherent message, a silent message that was promulgated, I know that the Jamaica Teachers Association calls for further talks with government as the new school year approaches, as the article says, and I'm looking at it, and it says, on Tuesday, the Jamaica Teachers Association rejected the government's recently adjusted wage offer following deliberations during the second day of the association's 62nd annual conference at the Ocean Coral Spring Resort in Trelawney, with 155 out of 213 teacher delegates voting to turn down the offer. Of the remaining delegate votes, 54 voted to accept the offer. One voting ballot was spoiled and another 3 were rejected. The wage offer which the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service made to all the public sector groups and agreed upon with the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, JCTU, covers a 3-year period from April 1, 2025 to March 31, 2028. It entails a one-off payment of $80,000 for the period, as I just mentioned, and the public sector workers receiving a 5% increase for the period April 1, 2026 to March 31, 2027, and another 5% increase for the period April 1, 2027 to March 31, 2028. I understand that the teachers, they have some matters that are quite important to them and they need to reflect on and certainly move in another direction, and according to the current president, Ms. Harrison. But what I'm getting back to is a fact that a message was silently promulgated that I think may have been disingenuous and almost trickify, if there is such a word, to the people of Jamaica. Because, even without you talking, you just hear people say, all right, they should be getting their $80,000 in the month of August. And to realize that that was not solidified. Nothing is signed off, as the article says. And then, you're having the teachers, most of the teacher delegates, not 155 of 213, not accepting the wage offer, only 54 of them accepting, and some of the ballots were spoiled, some were rejected. Jamaica seems like a real roller coaster. It seems as if we cannot settle, because the chicken feed that is offered to the eagles is unbelievable and unacceptable in some instances. When you hear these 5% and increment, it reminds me of when the scripture says, if you sow sparingly, you will reap sparingly. But if you sow bountifully, you will reap bountifully. This country has sowed sparingly for decades to the people of Jamaica. Poverty is at an all-high, even though unemployment is at 3%. People are poor and disenfranchised, indigent, impoverished. I'm not understanding the mathematics behind it. I'm not understanding the algorithm. And this little one-off payment could have just been like a click, and still negotiating on 80,000 Jamaican dollars. I'm not even sure how much that is in US right now. Anyway, guys, you know what to do with TikTok and YouTube. Subscribe, give me one of those lions, and you can follow me on Instagram.